Mr. President, I wanted to talk about this stimulus package and economic issues. I know the FISA bill is going to come up again. I have some strong feelings, as my colleagues know, about the retroactive immunity in that bill. But I was stunned last evening. I sat and listened to the State of the Union. I've been to a lot of them over the years. In fact, the presiding officer and I walked in together last night, and he asked me how many, and I told him how many. When I said the number, it stunned me in a way, how many I've been involved in. I was elected to the House in 1974, went to my first one in January of 1975 with Gerald Ford, giving a State of the Union. And I've been to every one since. I haven't missed a one over the last 3 decades. And last evening, and there have been some great ones and others less than great. Last evening, what surprised me, put aside whether you like the rhetoric or not, here we are in a nation where, by everyone's estimation, we're either in a recession or about to enter one. We have economic data that indicates this country is in deeper trouble economically than we've been in years. And there was hardly any reference to it whatsoever, other than a paragraph or so about a stimulus package. So the elephant in the room, if you don't mind using that animal analogy, the elephant in the room and the State of the Union, that's the State of the Union, was, of course, the State of the Union's in tough shape. Economically, we're in desperate shape in many ways. And so what beyond ironic is that we'd have a President of the United States talking about the condition of our Union, and here is a major, major problem. It's the subject of headlines every day across the nation, and hardly any reference to it at all. So here we were, gathered last evening to talk about where we are and what we need to do in the coming days, and hardly a passing reference to the conditions in our country. And so the President called this a period of economic uncertainty, I think was the words he used. And while I agree that we're in certainly an uncertain period, to put it mildly, what we know with some certainty is that the current economic situation is more than merely a slowdown or a downturn. It's even more than a mere recession or near recession. Instead, I think it's a crisis of confidence among consumers and investors. Consumers are fearful of borrowing and spending. Investors are fearful of lending. Financial transactions, which generate new businesses and new jobs, are shrinking in number and size by the hour in this country. And the incoming economic data shows how serious this President is. Just yesterday, the Commerce Department reported that the sale of new homes fell again in December, reaching a 12-year low in housing starts. Retail sales were down. Unemployment was up significantly in December. Credit card delinquencies are on the rise as consumers find themselves increasingly unable to tap the equity in their homes to help pay down credit card and other bills. And lastly, inflation increased by 4.1% last year, the largest increase in 17 years. A period of relative, what do you call it again? A period of uncertainty, economic uncertainty. Here you have record numbers and statistics pointing about the difficulty our nation is in economically, and we hardly heard any mention of it at all. This increase in prices, obviously inflation, is driven mainly by the rising cost of energy at $100 a barrel, hardly a reference to that last evening, $100 a barrel for oil. And I don't recall a word being spoken except about energy independence and to try and get there. Food and health care costs have gone up as well. Industrial production is falling, and we've been hemorrhaging jobs in the manufacturing sector. Our economy is clearly facing more than uncertainty, Mr. President. It's facing significant challenges to our nation's future economic growth and prosperity. The most important step we can take right now is, of course, to act to restore consumer and investor confidence, I mentioned. And unlike past recessions and slowdowns, the epicenter of this economic crisis is the housing crisis. And the epicenter of the housing crisis is the foreclosure crisis. That's what this is fundamentally and principally. Housing starts are at their lowest levels in a quarter of a century, 27 years. Home prices declined last year nationwide by 6% and are expected to decline again this year. That would be the first time since the Great Depression that you've had 2 consecutive years with home prices that have dropped twice in 2 years in a row. The first time since the Depression. And the President calls this a period of economic uncertainty. This crisis stems, above all, from the virtual collapse, as I said a moment ago, of the housing market. That collapse was triggered by what Secretary Paulson has rightly and properly, and I commend him for it, has called, and I'm quoting here, bad lending practices. Those are his words, not mine. These are lending practices that no sensible banker would ever engage in. Reckless, careless, and sometimes unscrupulous actors in the mortgage lending industry essentially allowed loans to be made that they knew hardworking, law-abiding borrowers would never, ever, ever be able to repay when the fully indexed price kicked in. And they engaged in practices that the Federal Reserve and the Bush administration did absolutely nothing to effectively stop. As a result, foreclosures are at a record level. The value of people's homes is declining, and the tax base for state and local governments is shrinking, again, almost daily. A year ago, Mr. President, I chaired the first housing hearing in the Congress on the subject of predatory lending. I talked then about the possibility of more than 2 million Americans would lose their homes as a result of such lending practices. I know there were those who scoffed when I mentioned the number of 2 million almost a year ago. Well, no one is scoffing now, Mr. President. Today, foreclosure rates persist at record levels. Estimates are that foreclosures will continue to climb for most of this year, dip briefly, and then begin to rise again when new resets kick in. The catalyst of the current economic crisis, as I said a moment ago, the housing crisis. And the face of the housing crisis is the foreclosure crisis. Therefore, in my view, any short-term stimulus package should include measures that will address the causes and symptoms of the foreclosure crisis head-on, as well as trying to provide some immediate relief for those who are feeling this the most. So I want to indicate at the outset that I'm very supportive of the work done by Speaker Pelosi in the House and members over there who have worked on this, along with John Boehner, the Republican leader. They've done to formulate outlines of a stimulus package that the administration could support.